Hi, just checking. Does someone mind popping on and seeing if, just making sure that they can hear me?
I can.
Hi, I can hear you.
Oh my gosh, sorry. I tried to go onto my fancy new computer and it like apparently doesn't have a microphone. So I had to like last second go onto my 20-year-old computer and it looks like the camera didn't pick up really well. So I guess I'm gonna be blurry for most of this. But just checking in, Carlene, I is this your first Zoom with us or have you been in our Zoom?
I think I came a couple of months ago to the private one.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And are you working on instrument now?
Yes, I'm about halfway.
Oh, perfect. Wow, you're going fast. Okay, and then Marissa, how's your flight training going?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. Everything's going good.
Good. Have you been
You
able to
know,
fly much?
well, part of it's my schedule, crazy schedule. I'm still around like lesson 11. Yeah, I think we're going to be doing 11 and 12 on my next one. So getting
Awesome.
there, getting
Yeah.
there.
Are you flying the 150?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay. And then two of my students are here, Emily and Kenzie. Um Emily just took her private and is working on instrument, and then Kenzie is working on her private. She has her Checkride coming up. So
Wow.
just checking in. Kenzie, can you hear us? Oh, maybe still joining. Okay. Well, I wasn't really sure how the turnout was going to be. I got a couple requests for me to do like the mock oral for instrument, but those people might have like since then taken their check rides. So I know that some of you guys are working on your private. So um okay, cool. Thanks, Kenzie. So I'll be asking instrument questions, but if you guys have no idea what I'm talking about, since obviously you're working on your private, just let me know and I'm more than happy. I might turn this into more of like a teaching session. Um, so the first question that you'll probably get asked is how to know that you are current for an instrument flight. Oh, cool. We just got one more student. I have one more instrument student right now. Oh my gosh, sorry, my computer has a bunch of pop-ups. Can you guys hear my pop-ups going off? Okay, I think it's almost done. Okay, anyways. Okay, I think it's done. I'm just gonna ignore it. Okay, I think Book's just got on too. So one of the first questions that you might get asked on a instrument check ride would be like what privileges and documents you'll get. Oh my gosh. Sorry, my computer suddenly thinks that it's getting a virus. Once again, this computer is like 20 years old. Um, I'm trying to ignore it, but can you guys hear the little like chirping that it's doing? Okay, hopefully it goes away. So the first question would be, how do you know that you're current for an instrument flight? So for private pilot, we have the 3 takeoffs and landings in 90 days, and the biennial flight review. But how do we know as an instrument pilot that we are legal and current to fly?
Is this the 6 hits?
Exactly. Yeah. So do you want to try to describe that a little bit?
I believe it's 6 instrument approaches,
Mm-hmm.
holding, intercepting, and tracking.
Exactly. Yeah. So, so like she said, in 6 months, you need to do 6 instrument approaches. So it could be under the hood or an actual IFR, which I'll go into a little bit. And in those 6 approaches, you need to do intercepting and tracking. Oh, we got you need to do intercepting and tracking as well as a hold. So a lot of times people use the acronym 6 hits, which stands for 6 instrument approaches, a hold, intercepting, and tracking. And then Carlene, do you want to go into a little bit more detail of what happens if you do not accomplish 6 instrument approaches in those 6 months?
I believe you have to have like a safety pilot
Mm-hmm.
to get current again.
Yeah, exactly. So after 6 months, if you have not done those 6 hits or those 6 instrument approaches, then you go into like a 6-month phase where you have a chance to go up with a safety pilot and do the instrument approaches under the hood or IFR if the safety pilot is instrument rated. And one thing to note is that if you want to maintain currency, your instrument or your safety pilot does not need to be instrument certified. They could just be a private pilot. Now, Carlene, actually, if anyone who knows this answer wants to go ahead and volunteer, just digging a little deeper into this question. If you're wearing the foggles, so let's say you're under the hood trying to get your 6 instrument approaches for currency, and you are wearing the foggles past the initial approach fix, but then you take off the foggles during the approach, does that count as your 6, or like, does that count as an instrument approach logged?
You broke up.
Oh,
I heard final approach fix,
no,
I think.
right. So let's say that you're trying to get your currency. So you wear the foggles or the hood for an approach, and then you take off the foggles after the initial approach fix. Can you log that approach?
I don't think so. I think it has to be the final approach.
Correct. Yeah, very nice. You have your check ride coming up?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm
Well,
just
good.
halfway trying to
Yeah,
build
that's
hours.
cool to do that. So yeah, if you are wearing the hood to get instrument current, then you need to wear the hood down to I believe minimums, and then or past the final approach fix. But then if you are but if you're doing the approach on like an actual IMC or in the clouds, then you just need to be past, I believe, the initial approach fix to be able to log it as an instrument approach. And then what happens, let's say that you spent 6 months, you did not do 6 instrument approaches, and then another 6 months went by and you did not go up with a safety pilot, then what happens?
I think you have to go up with a CFII.
Yeah, it could be a CFII or a like DPE. I don't know why you would do a DPE, but you would need what is it called when you need to go up with a CFII to get currency back? Oh, it'll be called an initial an instrument proficiency check, so an IPC. So if you go 6 months, don't do 6 approaches, and then go another 6 months and don't fly with a safety pilot, then you need to go in for what's called an instrument proficiency check with the CFII, which is I believe the back of the instrument pilot ACS has a little table saying what needs to be covered on an instrument proficiency check. But it's basically like a flight review. I've given a couple instrument proficiency checks. It's not a test. You just go up with the CFII, shoot a couple approaches, and I just like make sure that you are safe and competent to act as pilot in command IFR. And then I just log it in your logbook. So cool. So moving on, we talked about getting us ready as the pilot for IFR. By the way, if you're IFR, then all of the private pilot currency rules still apply to you. So you still need the biannual flight review and a valid medical and the 3 takeoffs and landings in 90 days on top of the 6 hits or those 6 approaches. Okay, moving on to airworthiness for IFR. Sorry, Carlene, you just seem to know these answers, so I'll ask you. Let's say that we are taxiing out and we notice that the turn coordinator is not doing anything in taxi. So it's just remaining level in the turns. Are we allowed to fly IFR?
No,
Cool. And
it's a part of our check.
what was that?
It was a part of our checks.
Yeah, it's a part of our checks. And is there how do we know that we're not allowed to fly without a turn coordinator, IFR?
So anyone else can answer.
No worries. So
I can
let's see,
answer. It's not a part of the 6-pack. If it's not working, then it's not a part of all the 6 things you need, right?
So private pilot, we have 91205. So that's that A Tomato Flames acronym. That says everything that was in 91205 of the FAR aim. And it tells you everything that is required equipment for private pilot. So Sherry, like you were saying, things like the airspeed indicator or altimeter. But then if you go back to 91205, there's another list of equipment that is required for IFR flight as well. So I don't know if anyone studying instrument has heard of it, but it's called grab card. And grab card is like the IFR version of A Tomato Flames, the required equipment. So oh my gosh, I'm not going to go through all of it right now, but it's basically say in that grab card acronym, it says that you need a working turn coordinator in order to fly, instrument at least.
But I'm looking, my uncle's looking at buying a plane, and when I look up, because I would like to IFR next. And so when I'm looking at the things you need to have to buy a plane that's IFR, it says the 6-pack. So it seems like, although I'm not training yet, just listening, all those 6-pack things have to be working to fly IFR, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah, all the 6.
That's kind of an easy way to break it down. Yes. No.
Yeah, so all the 6-pack things need to, in general, be working, but like understanding specifically, so if you break it down in the private pilot, A Tomato Flames required equipment, I believe it requires the airspeed indicator and the altimeter, so that's 2 things in the 6-pack. And then in the instrument version of A Tomato Flames, which would be grab card from 9125, that specifies that you need a attitude indicator, turn coordinator, and directional gyro. So actually, trying to remember now if a vertical speed indicator is required. I don't think it is. So technically, someone correct me if I'm wrong.
When I'm doing my research for what it takes to make a client for IFR flying for purchase, it is everything on the 6-pack has to work.
Okay, well, if you want,
I
then
don't know off of the, 91, 93, whatever, but like I'm pretty sure that the internet's not lying when it says that like in order to be plane to fly for purchasing, I'm imagining that they're the same.
yeah, so just knowing, I'm sure the internet's right, but just knowing to reference that 91,205, that's what has,
91,205.
what?
You said 91,205.
Yeah, that's where it
Yeah.
in detail says everything that's required for instrument, operative equipment.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, we talked about airworthiness, and getting us legal to fly. So we'll move on to like weather now. There's a lot more risk with IFR flying, with icing. Private pilot, you're not really like putting yourself, hopefully not really putting yourself in many situations for icing, because you need visible moisture. However, IFR, that becomes more of a risk. So does anyone want to talk about why icing is bad? Like what threats does icing pose to us? And anyone can volunteer. Also, I'm sorry, I'm gonna try to stop these notifications coming in from my very old computer thinking it's getting a virus. But yeah, if anyone wants to go ahead and volunteer, just name a couple reasons why icing is dangerous for us.
It can mess up our plane. It can give us false readings.
Yeah, repeat that one more time. It can mess up our plane with what?
And it can give us false readings.
False readings, you mean like if icing's blocking like the
Right. The pitot
Okay.
tube or something.
Yeah, so that's one thing. It can give us like pitot static failures. What about some other things? Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
It can increase the weight of your plane, change the airfoil of the wings, so your characteristics will be different and you'll lose lift.
Yeah, exactly. So if there's icing, it can attach to like the leading edge of the wing and change the shape of the wing. So like Emily was saying, that can destroy lift if it's like destroying that smooth air over the wings. And it can also change our stall speed pretty dramatically. So once again, we have like a known manufactured stall speed. But well, it depends on a couple things, but if we get icing and it changes the shape of our wings, we actually won't know what our new stall speed is. So that's why if you suspect structural icing, you should consider diverting to a airport with a longer runway, or coming in with a faster approach speed, maybe not adding flaps, because there also is something called a tailplane stall. Have any of you guys heard of a tailplane stall? No. Okay. So it's basically where you get icing over the horizontal stabilizer of the plane. So the horizontal stabilizer, I have like plane here. So the horizontal stabilizer is what provides downforce, keeping the nose up. So if icing is severe enough on this vertical or horizontal stabilizer, it can destroy the airflow over it. And without this negative lift on the horizontal stabilizer, you'll get an uncommanded pitch down. So that's one risk with icing, that tailplane stall. So in general, avoid icing. And that kind of leads into my next question. of how can we as pilots forecast icing in our route. And this applies to private pilot too. So if you have an answer, go ahead and unmute yourself. Mm,
Look at our weather and our every resource that we have available.
Yeah,
And even while we're in the plane, before we go, double check maybe if we have time.
yeah. Can you think of any like specific weather tools you can use to forecast that icing?
Like for flight.
For flight, yeah. I was thinking one would be like a air met. Do you remember learning about those?
Yeah, the Sierra Tango and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's the 3 air mets, Sierra, Tango, and Zulu. And the Zulu air met is specifically for icing. So ForeFlight has that great overlay where you can go onto the sectional page and look at all the air mets. And if you click on them, you could see more details on the forecasted icing. Another way that I look at ice or like the potential for icing along my route is a winds and temperatures aloft chart. And I think ForeFlight has on the airports page, if you go to weather, it will tell you like pretty much like a winds and temperatures aloft page too, just for like a general idea. And for icing to form, the temperature needs to be 0 and for there to be visible moisture. However, if the weather or the temperature is like within like I'd say 3 degrees of 0, I would still be 0 degrees Celsius. I would still be a little hesitant to fly with icing because the surface of the plane can be colder. Another really good tool for icing is PyReps. So we have PyReps for like turbulence and wind shear, but if you go ahead and look at PyReps, they can have really good detailed reports of like what kind of icing they encountered, what severity, and what altitude they were at when they included it. So those are some of my 3 tools that I use when I'm like looking at a flight to see, first of all, just a big overview if there's potential for icing, and then I'll go ahead and get an official weather brief to follow through and cover my bases on that. And then this is more of an IFR question. So if nobody knows this, like just let me know and I'll go ahead and answer it for you guys. But there is de-icing and anti-icing equipment. Do you know what kind of equipment your plane has? Anyone can volunteer.
I think the Cessna has anti-icing.
Correct, yeah. Yeah. So anti-icing is preventing the ice from happening. So it's like just a preventative measure. Whereas de-icing is removing icing that's already formed. So a lot of our general aviation trainers are not going to have de-icing, which would be like de-icing fluid, or some planes will have like leading edge, like they're called boots, where they like inflate and will like crack off the ice, or heating. So a lot of our general aviation planes don't have de-icing, but they will have anti-icing, which is preventing the icing from forming in the first place. So like carb heat or pitot heat. Some people argue that cabin heat is anti-icing because it'll heat up the cabin to prevent icing on the windscreen. And then I was gonna bring up an icing scenario. Here, I'm gonna screen share you guys real quick. But let me know if this is like going too in depth once again, because I know not all of you guys are actually working on your instrument. but we're going to pull up. Can you guys see my screen okay? Yeah, okay. Let me go ahead and pull up a chart. Okay, so here's an IFR sectional. IFR chart. So once again, if you guys don't know this, just let me know and I can go through it with you. But let's say that we are traveling from, what airport is this? Reno. Or it looks like this is Truckee Tahoe. So let's say that we are going from Truckee Tahoe here to this Lovelock Airport along this Victor 6 airway. And let's say that we're right about at WADS and we start to pick up icing. Let's say that we are at, let's say that we're at like 11,500. What would be some of the options that you'll have? Oh my gosh. It's again, computer thinks it has a virus. So let's say that we're at WADS at 11,500 and we start to notice that we're picking up some icing along the wings. What would some of your options be if you were on an IFR flight plan in the clouds?
You can always divert to a different airport.
Yeah. So I would say icing, depending on how bad it is. Well, pretty much any icing in general aviation, I would start considering a diversion. So that's completely correct. Which brings up a good point. For example, this Fernley Airport, it's in Brown, so it does not have any instrument approaches. So depending on how bad the cloud cover is, I might have to like consider the approaches of which airport I'm diverting to, if it has proper approaches to get me out of the clouds. So you can always consider diverting. Any other ideas?
Lower altitude.
Yeah, okay, that was gonna be my next one. Perfect. So if we're like 11,500 at WADS, or sorry, 11,000 at WADS. Usually as we go down in altitude, it'll start to get warmer. So in general, we have that like 80 abatic lapse rate, where the temperature cools about 3 degrees Celsius for every 1,000 feet. So as we descend, we can expect hopefully less icing. So as far as what altitude we can descend to, it looks like the lowest altitude along this airway is about 9,500. So we could definitely request lower from that 11,000 altitude. Another thing you could do is if you know that you were not in the clouds previously, like let's say that you just entered the clouds, you could ask air traffic control to, if you could just do a 180 and return to your previous airport. But one thing to note is, depending on the severity of the ice, I would potentially consider declaring an emergency. Once again, it depends on like how bad the icing is and how long you expect to be en route, like if you can divert quickly or not. But that would be an imminent, potentially emergency situation. So don't mess with ice. It's a big deal when you're studying for IFR. Anyways, so I'll move on from icing. Another topic I wanted to go through is how to file and pick up your IFR flight plans. So does anyone know how to file an IFR flight plan?
third, fourth flight, and I think you can call.
Yeah, so you can call a weather briefer or the 1-800-WX brief phone number and file a flight plan with them, or you can go online and file it that way. Or like Carlene said, my favorite way is just to go on fourth flight. One really nice thing about filing IFR on fourth flight is that they give you like recommended routes to your airport. So for example, fourth flight will tell you a recommended route to file and how often that route is being cleared. I know there's been a couple of times where like I filed, like I went to go file a route that made perfect sense to me. But then when I went on fourth flight, it showed a different route that air traffic control was like clearing much more frequently. So that's a really good tool. And then let's say that we filed a flight plan. How can we go about picking up our IFR clearance? Let's say that we are at this untowered airport here without an approach. Here long or whatever, right here. Does anyone have ideas of how we could pick up the IFR flight plan?
Contact flight service station.
Yeah, exactly. You could contact flight service station and have them work as a relay. Or you could look up, they probably won't have their own clearance delivery frequency, but they might have a clearance delivery phone number. So you could open your flight plan via phone or by using flight service. Or one thing you could do if the clouds are not bad is you can depart VFR and then pick up your IFR flight plan with the controller once you get in the air as well. And let's see. I'm gonna go into a couple deeper questions, and once again, if you guys don't know that or the answers to these, no pressure. I know that not all of you guys are working on instruments, but I'm gonna go ahead and start looking up some examples of approach plates. So do you guys know when you need to legally fly an alternate or legally file an alternate IFR?
It's the 0, 1, 2, 3 rule.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and describe that.
So you need, I believe, 3 miles visibility, 2,000 above clouds, and I don't remember the one.
Okay, yeah, so what Carlene was talking about was the 1, 2, 3 rule. So when filing an IFR flight plan, you do not need to file an IFR flight or file an alternate if the airport that you're going to satisfies the 1, 2, 3 rule, which means if the airport that you are going to for 1 hour before and 1 hour after your scheduled arrival is able to have 3 statute miles visibility and 2,000-foot ceilings from clouds. If it can satisfy all of those requirements, then you do not need a alternate to be filed. Now, once again, looking at this chart, for example, the green and the blue airports here have instrument approaches, whereas this brown airport means that it does not have an instrument approach. So in that scenario, file an alternate. Like if you're going to an airport without an instrument approach, then file an alternate. But yeah, if the weather satisfies that 1, 2, 3 rule, then you don't legally need to file an alternate, although it's probably still. And some things to note. My computer is really upset that I'm using it. Once again, if you don't know this answer, don't feel bad, but so if you are filing an alternate, and let's say that you're wanting to go to Modesto and use it as your alternate. And let's say that Modesto only has non-precision approaches. Do you remember what the minimum ceiling and visibility needs to be forecasted at Modesto in order for you to file it as an alternate? If it only had non-precision approaches, let's say.
You said non-precision?
Exactly, yeah. And it looks like I just. Oh, cool.
It's-
Someone's got the
Is
answer.
it 8 and 2?
Exactly, yeah. Someone else just said it too, so thank you for putting that in the chat. Correct. So you need that 1, 2, 3 rule to see if the weather will be good enough for you not to file an alternate. And if you do need to file an alternate, you need to see if the aircraft or the airport that you want to use as an alternate has precision or non-precision approaches. So if the airport that you are using has a non-precision approach, then the forecasted weather needs to be at least 800-foot ceilings and 2 statute clouds visibility. And if the airport has a precision approach, let's say we're using Stockton's ILS, then that lowers your weather minimums. So you only need 600-foot ceilings. Yep, thank you. Someone else just said it in the chat. So if the airport has a precision approach, then it only needs 600-foot ceilings and 2 statute miles visibility in order to be used as an alternate. But on the topic of alternates, does anyone have any questions on that? Nope, okay. But on the topic of alternates, let's say that we pull up an approach chart. I'm just pulling up a random local airport. And let's say that we see, let me see if I can zoom in here. Can you guys see this approach plate? Okay, cool. Let's say that we pull up an approach plate and we see this A here. Do you guys know what this A and a triangle means for instrument flying? Oh, sorry, I can't see the chat. Oh, I just got the chat. Perfect. Okay, yeah. So the chat was correct. This A on the approach plate means non-standard alternate minimums. So what that means is that if you want to use Truckee in this example as your alternate, it does not follow the 800-foot, 802 or 602 rule for minimums. So it might need higher minimums, which makes sense. Truckee is in mountainous terrain, so it probably wants to make sure that the weather is good if you're using it, or better if you're using it as an alternate. So if you see that A, then you would want to go to the alternate minimums page here, which would be on your ForeFlight. And let's see here, we would look up Truckee, which ATRK. I can't find it on here, but basically you would go ahead and look up your airport on the non-standard alternate minimums. So for example, Auburn, California, instead of the 802 or 602 minimums for category B aircraft, you would need 900-foot ceilings forecasted in order to use that airport as your alternate. And then does anyone know, last alternate question, does anyone know how much fuel you need in order to file? Basically, does anyone know what your IFR fuel reserves are legally? So in private pilot, you need at least 30 minutes of extra fuel at day and 45 at night. Does anyone know what the minimum fuel required for IFR is?
Your first airport of intended landing, alternate, and then 45 minutes.
Perfect. Cool, you guys answered that at like the same time. Perfect, so yeah. What Emily said is completely correct, so. Now going back to the approach plate. I'm so sorry. I don't know if you guys can see the little pop-ups with the virus. I don't know how to get rid of it. So if anybody has any recommendations, please let me know. But let's go ahead and pull up this chart. So we talked about the A and the triangle. Does anyone know what the T means in the triangle on this approach plate? If anyone wants to say it in the chat. Okay, cool. Yep, the chat is completely correct. So if you are looking on a approach plate and you see this T in the triangle, it means that you now have non-standard takeoff minimums. So legally for IFR, what are your requirements in order to what are your takeoff minimums for taking off on an IFR flight plan as far as ceilings and visibility? Well, and then once again with the chat. Okay, so the chat is correct. In order to legally depart IFR, you do not have any takeoff minimums. So if you really wanted to, under Part 91, you could depart on an IFR flight plan with 0 visibility and a 0-foot ceiling. That's not a good idea. That's why it's good to have personal minimums. But why I'm bringing this up is this T with the triangle means non-standard takeoff minimums. So once again, we would go to, I believe ForeFlight would have a document going into more detail on the non-standard takeoff minimums. So let's say that we're going to Auburn again. It's saying that you have non-standard takeoff minimums or an ODP established, which I'm trying to find a more detailed. Let me see if I can pull up an ODP. So the trouble T is what it's called, I guess the slang, with the T in the triangle means that there's non-standard takeoff minimums. Also, it means that there's likely a ODP or an obstacle departure procedure established. So let me see if I can pull that up here. And what an obstacle departure procedure is it's specific instructions for how to take off out of an airport. when there is terrain around the airport that penetrates what's called the 40-to-1 gradient. So when airports are like getting set up for their procedures, a surveyor will go around and go 40 feet out from a runway and then 1 foot up. And that's what's called the 40-to-1 gradient. And if any obstacle penetrates this 40-to-1 gradient, they will establish an obstacle departure procedure. So let me go ahead and pull one up at Auburn. Here it is. Okay. So once again, usually if you're looking at an approach plate and see that T in a triangle, you would go ahead and look for the non-standard takeoff minimums, which for runway 7, it would be standard takeoff minimums. So you could take off with 0 visibility if you wanted to. But runway 7, it looks like now you're requiring a 700-foot ceiling and 3 statute miles visibility, with a minimum climb rate of 280 feet per nautical mile. And then it looks like the departure description is down here. So the instructions to fly after departure. Now, one thing to note is it's really important that when you see if you're planning on flying an obstacle departure procedure, you really want to double check that your plane has the required climb gradient or the climb performance in order to meet this climb gradient. Because if you notice, it specifies that you need a minimum climb of 280 feet per nautical mile. And we need to convert this to feet per minute, because when we're flying this, we won't really know how much we're climbing per mile. So I believe in what's called the TERPs, there's a graph for converting feet per nautical mile to feet per minute. But the formula to calculate how many feet you're climbing per nautical mile would be 60 divided by your ground speed. Or sorry, the formula to figure out how much you need to climb feet per minute wise in order to meet this climb gradient or any specified climb gradient would be 60 or ground speed divided by 60 times the required climb gradient. So in this scenario, in order to depart from runway 7, we need to climb 280 feet per mile. So if we're we're climbing out at, let's say, 80 knots over the ground, we would divide that by 60 and then multiply it by 280. So we would need almost 400 feet per minute climb rate in order to depart runway 7 safely, which is pretty reasonable in most planes. I think that was about it. One last thing I wanted to cover with these obstacle departure procedures. Has anyone here heard of a VCOA or a visual climb over airport? Or does anyone want to try to describe it? Okay. Cool. Well, a visual climb over airport is an option that you have if you're departing an airport IFR. And what it means is that you can depart the airport VFR and then climb, just like circle and climb over the airport. And then in this scenario, it's saying that you'll climb in that little circle above the airport. And then once you reach 200 or 2,500 feet, then you can go ahead and turn outbound on this procedure. So that's another option you have to climb to your en route altitude. Another check ride question, if anyone happens to know, Do you need air traffic control clearance in order to fly one of these obstacle departure procedures? Anyone wants to guess? Okay. Well, if you want to fly one of these obstacle departure procedures, you actually do not need air traffic control clearance. You do need, it looks like, for these visual climbs over the airport, but just to fly this departure procedure, it's a good idea to inform air traffic control, but you don't need to tell, it's not required. You do, however, need to tell air traffic control, or they'll probably assign you what's called a SID, so a standard instrument departures. So does anyone know what a SID is, or want to describe it a little bit? I'll pull one up. Okay, while I'm pulling this up, yeah, if anybody wants to describe a SID, go ahead. But here's one. For example, for LAX or Los Angeles. So you could have a departure procedure. Oh, it looks like someone just. Okay, the answer in the chat is correct. So there's two kinds of like departure procedures. There's the obstacle departure procedure, or the ODP that I just talked about. Or there is the SID, or the standard instrument departure. The obstacle departures are usually designed to keep you safe of obstacles, like the name says, whereas these standard instrument departures are usually at busier airports, and their goal is more for traffic separation and to ease workload. So if you're trying to pick up your IFR flight clearance or clearance at Los Angeles, air traffic control might assign you the Catalina 8 departure. And by assigning you the Catalina 8 departure, it means that you know just to follow this procedure, and it saves a lot of workload because now air traffic control doesn't need to like vector you around or assign like individual fixes along your routes. So it makes it a lot easier. One thing to note is that you can refuse a standard instrument departure, so a SID or a STAR, which is like the arrival version of this. You can refuse one of those if you're like unfamiliar with flying one of these departures. You would just need to note it in your flight plan remarks. My last questions were going to be more situational for lost comms. Is anyone, before I go into like too much detail, is anyone here familiar with what to do during IFR lost comms? If anyone wants to volunteer. I'll give us a simple.
MEA.
Yeah. So if you want to go ahead and describe what that means.
The minimum altitude that you were given, and then the expected, and then I don't remember the A.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. What Carlene is talking about is your lost procedures, or if you, okay, yeah, someone else just said it in the chat. What your lost procedures are if you lose communication in the clouds. So what Carlene was referring to was the acronym MEA. So if you lose communications, you want to fly to the highest of what we say MEA. So you want to fly to the highest of your minimum en route altitude. So like, let's say that we lost communications going from Sacramento to Placerville. We would want to fly the highest of our minimum en route altitude, which would be 5,000 feet in this scenario. The E would be our expected altitude. So like, let's say that air traffic control told us to depart Mather, climb to 3,000, expect 8,000 in 10 minutes. Well, since 8,000 is higher than 5,000, we would then climb to 5,000 if we lost, or sorry, we would then climb to 8,000 if we lost communications. And then the last letter in MEA is your assigned altitude. So if you lost communications, you would want to fly up to the highest altitude of the minimum en route altitude, expected altitude, or the altitude assigned to you by ATC. So that's for perfect. And someone just put a more descriptive point in the chat. So if anyone wants to like visually look at the acronym. So MEA describes our altitude selection if we lost communications. And then the other acronym is AVF, or the new F. It's just AVE-F. And that would describe how we would figure out our routing if we lost communications in the clouds. So what that means is the priority of our routing. So if we lost communications from, let's say, Mather to Auburn, but ATC already assigned us all of our routing, then we would just follow that. And then V would be vectors. So if, let's say we were not assigned routing, we got put on a vector by air traffic control, and we lost communications. Usually when they vector you, they say like, they tell you when to expect, or expect direct soon, or expect direct to a certain waypoint when they vector you. And the reason why air traffic control will do that is because if you're on a vector or a heading assigned by them, and you want to, if you lose communications, you want to go directly to that waypoints that they told you to expect, or that they were vectoring you for. So that's AV, and then E would be expected. So if you don't have a vector or a assigned route, then you would go to your expected route when you pick up your ATC clearance. And then the F, let's say, I can't think of a scenario where this would happen, but let's say that you get up in the clouds and you lose communication and you don't have any of the previous like assigned vector or expected route, then you would just fly what you filed. So, okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for the correction in the chat. That's good to have it written out, so if anyone wants to check that out. So just to reiterate, if you lose communications, you would fly the highest altitude out of that MEA acronym, and then the routing priority that you would go laterally, if you couldn't talk to ATC, would be that AVF acronym. So assigned, vectored, expected, and filed. I have a couple more things to go over for IFR, but that's like really getting into the weeds, and I know that some of the people here like maybe are not at that stage of their training yet. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop here as far as the Zoom goes. But I know that I didn't get into like an official mock oral. I was more like teaching today. So if anybody wants to go ahead and do like an official mock oral with me one-on-one, you could go ahead and reach out to Girls Love to Fly, and you can request me and I can go ahead and do like a mock one-on-one oral with you guys. Let me go ahead and stop my screen share now. Or am I done screen sharing with you guys now?
It's still up.
It's still up. Okay. On. This computer's so old. Okay. Anyways, I'll just keep it on this page. So I'll go ahead and end my mock oral or my IFR session here. But if anybody wants to do a mock oral with me, actually here, I'm just gonna put my email address in the chat. And if you guys wanted to set up a mock oral or had any questions about it, just go ahead and email me personally once this is done. So I just popped that up. And does anyone have any like questions for any topics that we covered today? We hit a lot kind of quickly, so. Okay, cool. Does anyone have any requests for future Zooms, like any topics that they want to see? Okay, well, if anyone has any requests, go ahead and email me. Other than that, I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you guys for bearing with me trying to figure out this old computer. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your night. Thank you guys for joining. Okay, see ya.
Bye.